After 9 months of study, I am convinced that if the law changes, the United States military can do this, even in a time of war.
Our basic assessment is that our military can make this change.
Now that we have completed this review, I strongly urge the Senate to pass this legislation and send it to the President for signature before the end of the year.
I came to this conclusion not only as a co-chair of the Department of Defense review, but perhaps more importantly, as the commander of U.S. Army forces in Europe. I was cognizant every day of this review that I might have to actually lead the changes including in our report. As a serving commander, I'm confident that if this law changes, I and the leaders with whom I serve can do just that.
Admiral Mullen, what has led to your change in thinking? If you could share with the committee just a bit about supporting policy change.
Well, I mean, fundamentally for me, Senator Graham, it has been the issue, this mismatch of an institution that I've been raised in my whole life that values integrity in many ways across everything we do, and then we've got thousands of men and women who were willing to die for their country that we ask them to lie about who they are every single day, I just fundamentally think that is wrong.
I understand.
And I worry, Senator Graham, that it is corrosive over time. It's not one of these things that's going to, light switch isn't going to go and it's going to be a disaster, but it is corrosive over time. And it is, particularly during a time of war, where we are focused so heavily on our combat mission, it undermines in ways our ability to do what we need to do because of the people side of this, because of the leadership focus it takes, et cetera. Right. And that's fundamentally what's led me to my beliefs and conclusions with respect to where we are.
In all likelihood, there were gay Americans serving at Valley Forge. There were gay Americans at Gettysburg. There were gay Americans on Normandy Beach. There are gay Americans serving in Iraq and Afghanistan today. In all likelihood, that's probably true, wouldn't you say?
Yes, sir, I think it's a very reasonable assumption.
There are probably gay Americans buried at Arlington Cemetery and in Normandy Beach, where I took my young sons a couple years ago. One of the most inspiring things you can possibly see. Those rows of crosses and the American flag flying in the breeze, people who laid down their lives for our country. There are probably gay Americans buried there, aren't there?
I think it would be a reasonable assumption.
How do we say to them or to their families that we've honored their sacrifice, laying down their life, and yet if we knew who they were, not only would they not be buried there, they would have been drummed out of the armed forces?
Senator, my response to that would be based on the oath that we took, that all of us in uniform take, and that is that we support and defend the Constitution of the United States. That means we follow the law, and so we have to do that.
This is the second time that I have dealt with this issue as a leader in public life. The prior case being at CIA in 1992, when as director I ordered that openly gay applicants be treated like all other applicants. That is, whether as individuals they met our competitive standards.
There are elements in the CIA who perform functions that are pretty similar to military functions, are there not?
Yes, sir, some.
Have you heard of any unforeseen circumstances based on your decision in those units, taking place in those units?
Not one.
We're on the front lines of a turning point in American history. We have these in every generation. This country, from the beginning, was defined not by its borders, but by our values. The Declaration of Independence says, you know, we're all endowed by God with those equal rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And every generation has realized those rights better because they weren't realized at the beginning in 1776 for women, for people of color, et cetera, et cetera. In our time, one of the great transitions occurring is the growing readiness and understanding among the American people that you simply, it's just wrong and un-American to discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation.
To me, the issue seems to be not whether to allow gays to serve in the military, but whether to allow them to serve openly. But permitting them to serve but not openly undermines the basic values of the military: honesty, integrity, and trust. And when that's undermined anywhere, it's undermined everywhere. It also seems that our military is expected to say, I don't want to lie, but you won't let me tell the truth. How do we square this circle?
I think, Senator Nelson, I mean, you've hit at the core, from my perspective, you've hit at the core issue, and I can't square the circle. Certainly, historically, have not been able to. And I think it is your comment about, you know, if it exists anywhere, it exists everywhere, and that's been the case with respect to gay and lesbian service for my whole career, including under this law. And I think it does fundamentally undermine who we are because we're an institution that is so significantly founded and based on integrity. So I can't square it.
Since this time, my years in the military, and since being in this position, I've had the opportunity to visit Walter Reed, and you know, I still can't get out of my mind the one time I saw a soldier who lost both his legs, lost an arm, and lost most of another arm doing crunches, you know, to try to get his torso strengthened enough so he could still have a viable, you know, and fulfilling life. And seeing many other injured men and women, you know, who have not only given their lives, their limbs, but their lives. And I've been to many funerals, unfortunately, in my home state for those soldiers. And one thing I never asked was, are they gay or straight? It never even crossed my mind, to be honest with you. I just wanted to know if they gave their limb or their life, you know, with pride and with honor for our country.
War does not stifle change, it demands it. It does not make change harder, it facilitates it. I do not believe the stressors currently manifesting themselves in the lives of our troops and their families, lengthy deployments, suicides, and health care, are rendered insurmountable or any graver by this single policy change. Nor do I believe that simply acknowledging what most of our troops already know to be true about some of their colleagues threatens our ability to fight and win this nation's wars. Quite the contrary. Today's young leaders are more attuned to combat effectiveness than any of the last 3 decades. I've been serving with gays and lesbians my whole career. I went to war with them aboard a destroyer off the coast of Vietnam. I knew they were there. They knew I knew it. And what's more, nearly everyone in the crew knew it. We never missed a mission, never failed to deliver ordnance on target. Readiness was not impaired. What mattered most, what made us a crew, was teamwork and focus on our combat mission. And let me be clear, nothing will change about our standards of conduct. Nothing will change about the dignity and the fairness and the equality with which we treat our people. And nothing will change about the manner in which we deal with those who cannot abide by these standards. The military is a meritocracy, where success is based on what you do, not who you are. There are no special classes, no favored groups. We may wear different uniforms, but we are one. There are some for whom this debate is all about gray areas. There is no gray area here. We treat each other with respect, or we find another place to work, period. In the long run, repeal of this law makes us a stronger military and improves our readiness. It will make us more representative of the country we serve. It will restore to the institution the energy it must now expend in pursuing those who violate the policy. And it will better align those organizational values we claim with those we practice. This is about integrity. Our people sacrifice a lot for their country, including their lives. None of them should have to sacrifice their integrity as well. It is true there is no constitutional right to serve in the armed forces, but the military serves all the people of this country, no matter who they are or what they believe. And every one of those people, should they be fit and able, ought to be given the opportunity to defend it.
Joining us now for the interview is a currently serving active duty officer in the United States military. I will not tell you the branch in which he serves. I will not tell you his name, and we have otherwise shielded his identity by necessity. He uses the pseudonym J.D. Smith. He has become the spokesman for an underground network of active duty troops who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, a group known as OutServe. J.D. Smith, thank you for being willing to do this interview tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Why is it worth it to you to take the risk to speak out like this and to do the work that you have done with OutServe?
I think why it's important for me is that at some point while you're serving under the military and under this policy, you see some of the atrocities that occur to people across the world, including myself, who was blackmailed under this policy. And at some point you have to see that there's something larger than yourself out there, and you have to take these risks to do something like this to help others and to help create the change that's needed.
One of the things that was discussed today, particularly by Senator Lindsey Graham, was that he emphasized at this hearing today that the military's current application of Don't Ask, Don't Tell is somewhat kinder and gentler, essentially claiming that the days of the witch hunts are over. You just said that you feel that you have been blackmailed under this policy. Does the way that Lindsey Graham talked about this policy today comport with your own experience and the experience of other members of OutServe?
Absolutely not. With our network, we're able to monitor what's going on across units, across the whole military. And what we're seeing across the military is that commanders are not doing a gentler, kinder military. What they're doing is sometimes coming up with something more creative, such as removing someone from a unit or punishing them that way. Again, they're not issues peer-to-peer as far as the younger generation goes with troops on the ground. It's an older leadership that's the issue.
What about the emphasis today, pursuant to the Department of Defense report on the Don't Ask, Don't Tell repeal? The emphasis that was put today on opponents of repeal, on members of combat units, frontline combat unit, combat arms group, and the Marine Corps in particular being more resistant to the prospect of repeal than other aspects of the military. That wouldn't be a generational factor. Those would be largely younger troops.
I think what was really important to notice in that report are two things. The first thing is the fact that 92% of people that knew someone in their unit that was gay and lesbian, they were more comfortable with the fact of people serving openly in their unit and were okay with it. The second important thing that was brought up in the hearings was the fact that people that were actually serving in combat were the ones more comfortable with gays and lesbians serving openly than the combat arms that were actually not in combat at the time, which is a really interesting note to note.
What was the goal of forming an underground secret network of active duty personnel who are LGBT? What's the mission of OutServe?
Originally, we formed back in July because we thought that the policy was going away. It looked like it was going away back then to actually go away next year. And so we wanted to create a peer network that could be supportive to active duty gay and lesbian troops post-repeal. A lot of these organizations exist in the DoD right now, but that was our original goal, was to exist post-repeal. But right now we're seeing that we can get out a lot of information telling the truth about this policy and what is actually happening to people on the ground.
The Defense Department report on repealing the policy went into great detail about the care they took to seek out the opinions of gay service members, despite the inherent logistical difficulty of trying to identify people who can be fired for being identified. As an active duty officer yourself, as a gay man, do you think that the report broadly got it right?
I do think they broadly got it right. I think the Pentagon Working Group did an amazing job in actually taking the time to talk to active duty service members to find out what they thought about the policy and how the policy is happening, as well as gay and lesbian troops. They actually reached out through the RAND survey and other methods to actually talk to soldiers on the ground. So I think the Pentagon Working Group did an amazing job.
The active duty U.S. military officer using the pseudonym J.D. Smith, founder of the group OutServe, which is an underground network of LGBT active duty service members. Thank you, sir, for your time and your service and your trust in joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.